9/11 was my first day on the job as a senior executive of the National Security Agency. After in processing, taking the oath, getting all my paperwork straightened out, we were in this meeting, and it was a rather dramatic moment, particularly at the second World Trade Center tower had been hit. I remember standing up saying America's under attack. Little did I know, though, that 9/11 would launch the most unprecedented subversion of the Constitution in U.S. history. A story that has still, to this day, not been fully told. I'm first and foremost an American. I took the oath 4 times in my government career to support and defend the Constitution of the United States of America against all enemies, foreign and domestic. NSA had faced a significant challenge in the 90s, had to deal with vast amounts, the vast reams of data being generated by the digital age, the internet age. I was literally charged to be the leader at NSA to go out and find all of these programs, for dealing with making sense of lots and lots of information and providing the intelligence that mattered. Thin Thread was a revolutionary breakthrough solution to make sense of massive amounts of data and report on it, period. To provide superior intelligence while protecting, under the Constitution, the Fourth Amendment rights of Americans. It was the prime directive at NSA. You do not spy on Americans without a warrant. A Thin Thread was actually ready to go operationally for $3 million. Right? And for $100 million, could have deployed the entire system worldwide. Okay. But that was all rejected. I was actually told at one point, very shortly, soon after 9/11, for 3 weeks after 9/11, 3 to 4 weeks after 9/11, that we don't need that anymore, Tom. In this case, it was Thin Thread, because they've gone with a different solution. General Hayden, in 2001, was the director of the National Security Agency. He was a 3-star Air Force general. General Hayden launched NSA's flagship program called Trailblazer, a multi-billion-dollar program that ostensibly was going to bring NSA into the 21st century. By far, the single largest program that NSA had ever embarked on. But Trailblazer never developed anything. All Trailblazer became was a massive funding vehicle to feed a whole bunch of contractors. The government had spent $4 billion on nothing when a $3 million program would have done the job and then some. And then, as I discovered to my horror, they're going to turn the United States of America into the equivalent of a foreign nation for the purposes of dragnet blanket electronic surveillance with no controls, no accountability, and no oversight. I had people whispering to me, Tom, what are we doing spying on Americans? I was so concerned because I remember telling my immediate supervisor, what are we doing? She says, well, if you don't like it, she demurred. She says, go talk to the attorneys. My moment of truth was the conversation with a leading attorney within the Office of General Counsel, NSA. It was, and still to this day, the most chilling of conversations I've probably had, one of the most. Because here he is telling me, it's all been approved, don't worry about it. And don't ask any more questions about the program. It was clearly both a warning to me, and I was to stay away. I knew in that moment that if I remained silent, that I would be an accessory to a crime. That accessory, as a senior executive with significant responsibilities and accountabilities, reporting to the number 3 person at NSA, that as an accessory to a crime, I would be an eyewitness to the subversion of our own Constitution, warrantless spying and surveillance. I went to the Inspector General's office. I went to the Office of General Counsel. Right? I went to the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence. I went to the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence. And I went to the Department of Defense Inspector General's office. I was being told it's all legal, and I realized what I was facing. I was seeing high crimes and misdemeanors under the Constitution being committed by the White House. So I shared what was unclassified that I could say anonymously with a reporter so the truth could come out and point the spotlight back on the government, at least to say what was so in terms of what had happened. And there was a May 2006 article which for the first time publicly revealed the existence of the Thin Thread program and about the fraud, waste, and abuse. on a number of fronts, including Trailblazer. That really, no doubt, caused a real stir at NSA. I know that because I was still there. I'm getting ready for work, and I'm looking out my bedroom window, and I see a bunch of cars pull up, and doors open, and a dozen agents are streaming across my front yard. And you can imagine in that moment, they've come for me. Without a knock on the door. My wife and son, she was about to take them to middle school. Their eyes are just, I still remember the look on their faces. They had a warrant, they had a search warrant. Total frame job, it's totally trumped up. The charges, the charging documents, were the very documents, unclassified, that I've been told to keep. I met the chief prosecutor at a secret FBI facility in Maryland, where the prosecutor basically threatened me with spending the rest of my life in prison if I didn't cooperate. Otherwise, we'll throw the book at you. And he was, what will we throw the book at you with? Conspiracy, violation of the Communications Intelligence Act, violation of the Espionage Act, obstruction of justice, and a whole bunch of other things. My life at that point was turned completely upside down. I'm formally indicted. 10 felony counts, 5 under the Espionage Act, 1 for obstruction of justice, and 4 for making false statements, all of which, if I was found guilty on, would mean 35 years in prison. 35 years, 400 months. I'm being charged as an American under the Espionage Act. It is the worst thing an American can be painted with. I'm being charged under a World War I statute designed specifically for spies, not whistleblowers. So you can imagine how I'm feeling as an American, absolutely betrayed by my own government. I'm spending tens and tens of thousands of dollars during this time period on a private attorney. I had to take out a second mortgage in my house. I had to basically clear out half of my retirement account from the government just to pay for all this, plus a whole number of other expenses. This is April of 2010, and it's surreal. I'm reading all of this press, New York Times, Washington Post, you name the outlet, okay? New media, old media, in between, institutional media, this message is the same, yeah. And it's being fed by leaks, okay? Very convenient for the government to be feeding these reporters and journalists, you know, how bad this is. I knew what the truth was, but how am I going to prevail? And the deck is stacked against me in terms of the criminal defense. It actually is. A few days go by, and I happened to read an article. It was an op-ed in the LA Times, penned by Jesselyn Radak. I cannot begin to tell you the relief I felt. I did a little bit of research in terms of her background. She'd been a whistleblower at the Department of Justice, which was another whole confirmation. Someone who actually had lived the ordeal as a whistleblower, what that meant. She understood exactly what was at stake. So I made contact with Jesselyn. We ended up having a whole series of conversations, ended up representing me for whistleblower advocacy and support in an extraordinary way, and became my voice when I had no voice, became an advocate when there were no advocates. And she began to strategically turn the tide in terms of the court of public opinion. And as reporters and journalists met me, they realized that I was not just a caricature, that I was a real person. And so my first public outing, to say it that way, where I actually could speak my own voice, when I accepted the Truth-Telling Prize, the Ridenour Truth-Telling Prize, for 2011. Followed shortly by the Jane Mayer article, blockbuster article. To date, it remains the most comprehensive summary of what happened. And it became a white-hot, fever-pitch environment on the eve of my public trial, which was scheduled to take place on June 13th of 2011. The truth was now coming out about the government's egregious, vindictive, malicious, retaliatory prosecution. The criminal defense attorneys, we were the public defenders, coming back to me and say, hey, do you want to enter into a plea? I said, the only way I'm going to enter into any kind of plea negotiations without any assurance or guarantees of accepting is they have to drop all the charges. It was a negotiated plea agreement with the government, and I ended up pleading to the minor misdemeanor of exceeding authorized use of a computer. It had nothing to do with classified, it had nothing to do with retention, it had nothing to do with that. I was sentenced to 240 hour, 1 year probation and 240 hours of community service. It was extraordinarily relief. I remember I lived 4 years of hell. It's extremely dangerous in America right now to be right as a whistleblower when the government is so wrong. So speaking truth to power is now a criminal act. I am exhibit number 1 for that. I would not want any American to experience what I experienced. Again, there's many, many backstories to how far they went to destroy my life, okay? So it was a victory. It was an extraordinary victory. I don't look at my own country the same way anymore. Freedom is no guarantee. One's rights, given history, it's too easy for others to take them away. Where am I now? You know, I've gone back to school. I'm about a year away from finishing up my PhD in public policy and administration, specializing in leadership and management. And I am now very much aligned with and increasing demands for speaking about my story and what is so at stake for this country, as well as for freedom and rights and liberty across the world, not just here in the US. There's too much at stake. Freedom matters. People have asked me, why are you doing all this, Tom? Why would you risk your career? You had this extraordinary career. You were at the top of the game. And then you went to the press. Why, Tom? Because it was never about my needs. It was about the country. It's about what was at stake for freedom. I defend life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, because that's what matters. Not just for myself, but for others. And if others aren't living free, and if others aren't living with the rights that we have, okay? And if others cannot pursue happiness, then neither can I.